Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here to celebrate International Volunteer Day with us. There's a lot of registrants, so we are just going to take our time and let everyone get into the room. Apologies for flipping through the presentation while we were live. I should have done that earlier. You're in the right room. You're here to celebrate the heartbeat of change as it relates to international volunteering. And we're just waiting for everyone to get in. There was quite a massive amount of registrants today, so please bear with us. We will start very shortly. So we're going to get started. I see lots of people in the room. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Thank you for joining us from across Canada and around the world. My name is Tina, and I'll facilitate this next hour of discussion around international volunteering on this very special day. Before we get started, I did want to share a little bit of housekeeping. It won't be long. We do have French and Spanish interpretation, so please toggle on the icon globe as you require to facilitate your understanding of what's being discussed today. I also want to thank Fatima and Gilles for their interpretation services. You'll notice we also have Q&A. You don't have to wait until the end. As something comes up, you can just type it in the chat and put your questions in, and we'll leave time at the end to answer as many as we can. And we have our infamous chat button that I know many of you enjoy talking to one another, so please use that as you wish. Any questions that you would like to go to the speakers, panelists, do use the Q&A button, because that's the only area that we're going to check to get your questions answered. And before we start, I would like to recognize the traditional territory from where I am in Toronto. As a non-Indigenous person, I acknowledge that I am speaking from the traditional territories of the dish with one spoon, Takaranto. The land has been the home and gathering place of Indigenous peoples since time immemorial. The dish with one spoon territory refers to a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee peoples, who agreed to share this land and protect it together in a spirit of mutual cooperation. The dish with one spoon is a powerful metaphor representing the land as a shared resource to be used sustainably and peacefully by all who live here. It is a reminder of the importance of respecting Indigenous sovereignty, honoring treaties, and working towards true reconciliation. And today we're all about International Volunteer Day. And it's a real celebration and a real honor to recognize the important contributions of Cuso volunteers, but of all volunteers from agencies that make up this wonderful sector of volunteer cooperation. There's 13 such organizations, and funny enough, we call ourselves the Collective. With that, today you'll hear from volunteers about how they're driving social change by creating new jobs, how they're addressing gender inequality and supporting women to participate and lead, and how they're advancing climate action through education and through technical skills. International volunteers share skills, they exchange knowledge, and they build brighter futures for the world that we want to see. So with that, I want to thank the CUSO community, our alumni, our volunteers, our board, our donors, and all for your service. Thank you so much. And I just want to share that Global Affairs Canada, as well as the Collective, have videos that are circulating on our social media. I'm not going to play this here, but I do invite you to go to Cuso International's YouTube page, as well as our Instagram, to watch the video, as well as Global Affairs Canada's website. And with that, I would like to thank Global Affairs Canada for their contributions and their partnership to the Volunteer Cooperation Program. So we talk about this ephemeral international volunteering, and it's really hard to describe unless you've been a volunteer, or if you've done this kind of work. And it's best described by people who are there now and have done it in the past. I would like to welcome David Beer, a Cuso founding alumni, who first started his volunteer journey in the mid-60s. This will be a bit of an intergenerational conversation between the past and how the sector has evolved a little bit. I want to thank David and welcome him and thank him for his service that spans decades. And I want to start off with a real simple question. What was your first placement, Dave? And how did it act as a catalyst? Over to you. You have the mic.
Thank you very much, Tina. My first placement was in Jamaica in 1963-64. It was a one-year program with one of the founding organizations of Cuso, which then it was called the Canadian Voluntary Commonwealth Service, CVCS. And I was posted to Cobla Camp, a rural education center for about 200 young men, mostly from the rural areas of Jamaica. And I was a recreation officer and a leadership trainer as well. That posting, you can see there the Jeep and the name of the place underneath, was quite amazing for me. I think I was 22 or 23. I can't believe that. But it was the third group of about to become Cuso volunteers that went overseas. I can't remember how many of us were in Jamaica, but a good dozen or so. I'll leave that opening.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great opening. Here's another archival photo, but I do have a follow-up question, and
Okay,
that
I'll
is,
speak to that.
you want to speak to this first? Sure, and then I'll ask my follow-up.
They talked all day and all night. That's a panel of volunteers from International VSO, the Peace Corps, and one other one, I can't quite remember, at the Kuchijing conference in Aurelia, Lake Simcoe. That would have been 1966, after I came back from 2 years in Zambia, and that's another story.
It is another story. Thanks for that. We hear a lot about reflecting on Canada's role in the world. Was there any moment that stood out for you during your volunteer times that kind of related to this notion of Canada's role in the world?
Yes, given that my period of time working overseas as a volunteer was 30 or 40 years, there's a picture of the president of Zambia in 1966 meeting our group in his backyard garden. That was quite an amazing privilege to meet Kenneth Kaunda. But so much of our feelings at the time was that Canada could take a very strong positive role in international affairs. One of the passages of that work was through the Commonwealth, and that was quite extensive in the Caribbean and West Africa and Asia. So that was important for all of us, that we realized that Canada had a role. Where I was living and working, there wasn't any Canadian presence until in the late 60s. So Cuso was the only, quote, office with a shingle, if you will, in many of the countries in the mid-60s that Cuso started out with, in Tanzania, in Kenya and Uganda, There were high commissions eventually. So the Canadian presence was through hundreds of volunteers in Zambia and in Tanzania by 1969. And of course, Canada became involved in such issues as South Africa apartheid and Ian Smith's Rhodesia and the Portuguese occupation of Mozambique and Angola. It influenced me in understanding that whilst Zambia was free in 1964, most of the countries around it were occupied or ruled by minority government. So it was not very difficult for us to form an opinion that we were on the right side of the political question, and we put our shoulders to work for the freedom of that part of the world. It evolved into Cuso and many Canadians in the churches in Oxfam, etc., supporting the liberation movements and the refugees in the frontline states in the 70s. So
Thank
I'll
you,
stop
David.
there.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking us down the, those pivotal times of international cooperation in our sector. It's super interesting to know that Cuso had this connection, like they were there on the ground, and the government was utilizing the volunteer cooperants to, support some of the findings and research that was happening. Now I want to travel a bit back to 2024 and bring in our audience members. So I'm going to poll you. I'm going to launch a couple of polls that are, no more than 5 seconds each. So this is the first one. It's around motivation. And if I can get all of you to, you should be seeing it on your screen right now. What motivates you or motivated you to consider international volunteering? So please, oh, all of the above. I'm going to leave this up for a few seconds and we'll show the results right away. Okay, so I think things are slowing down, but I'm going to end poll and I'm going to share the results. As you can see, 70% of you are all of the above, which, goes from anywhere of driving change within communities and impact, your own personal experience and skills, and professional growth. So thank you for enticing us and sharing some of those. I'm going to share another poll. The next poll is just your whole volunteer spectrum. So have you volunteered? So I'm going to let everyone answer this particular question multiple times. We love it. Once. For everyone who's highlighting no, but I plan to, please reach out to cusointernational.org. We'll love to support you along that journey. I'm going to end the poll and share these results. So with the amount of people who've registered and are on the call, 26% of you who are planning, that's wonderful. And we thank you in advance. And I hope this town hall or this conversation with existing volunteers sparks more of a fire for you to put in those applications. And the final survey or poll is it looks like this one's a vote, but I'm not sure. It's not launching. It was around your interests. So I'll just share what some of the conversation is. Cuso International has 3 thematic areas that we work in: advancing climate change, building stronger economies, like job creation and entrepreneurship, and gender equality. So the question was around your interest in those thematics, but we'll get back to that. I apologize in advance for some of the technical glitches. Um, so with that, I really do want to now come back to 2024 and welcome Naomi. Thank you for being here again. You're here with us in July, so it's 6 months later. Maybe, Naomi, I'll leave it to you to introduce yourself, share a bit about your placement and what your day looks like. And just a reminder, Naomi is going to be speaking in French. This is a trilingual discussion. So once again, you've got the interpretation icon that you can select the language of your preference. Alors, c'est à vous, Naomi.
Merci beaucoup, Tina. Alors, je m'appelle Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Je veux juste m'assurer que vous m'entendez. Ok, d'accord, parfait. Alors, moi, je m'appelle Naomi Mpana et je suis une volontaire de la diaspora, si on peut le dire comme ça, et je suis avec Cuso depuis le mois de février. Donc, ça fait déjà 11 mois que je suis ici à Yaoundé, au Cameroun. J'ai été placée comme partenaire en fait au ministère de la Jeunesse et de l'Éducation civique en tant que conseillère en gestion d'entreprise. Alors dans les réalités, j'en ai plus fait au niveau de la communication stratégique au service du plaidoyer et du partenariat. Donc dans une structure de coordination qui fait un peu, j'ai envie de dire, ce que CUSO fait et ce que d'autres organisations comme PISCOP, comme David l'a mentionné un peu plus tôt, fait aussi. Donc, ils font la promotion du volontariat. Et dans ce cadre-là, mes responsabilités incluent donc renforcer les capacités à travers des formations de l'équipe du personnel, créer des outils pour rationaliser les processus, développer des guides pratiques. Et comme j'ai mentionné plus tôt, renforcer la communication pour promouvoir le volontariat localement au Cameroun. Alors, quelque part, en diversifiant enfin, je dis ici notre parce que quelque part, je m'inclus aussi dans la mission du Programme national de volontariat. Je m'approprie aussi ce qu'ils font et concrètement, je travaille sur plusieurs axes et je travaille aussi en collaboration étroite avec mes collègues. On fait des descentes sur le terrain et comme on est dans la communication stratégique, c'est vraiment de pouvoir les amener ou vraiment de les appuyer en fait à avoir un storytelling qui permet de raconter le volontariat comme il est vécu au Cameroun pour les Camerounais, mais surtout pour la promotion et la mutualisation des efforts pour le volontariat comme outil et comme tremplin d'insertion socio-professionnelle.
Merci, Naomi. Merci de représenter. Sorry. Thank you for representing Cameroonian diaspora and for demonstrating how communications skill sets can impact community members. So now I want to bring Christopher into the conversation. Chris, welcome. Thank you for being here. I have a similar question for you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what motivated you to volunteer? Over to you, Chris.
Sure. So my name is Christopher Popovich, and I'm the Natural Resources and Climate Change Advisor for Cuso Honduras. It has been 7 years since I've been here. I came in 2018 and I haven't seemed to have left. To be honest, I applied to volunteer in Guyana originally, but during the interview, the recruiting officer kept talking about Honduras. And I had just finished my master's in IWRM at McGill, and a partner here needed a watershed expert, so I decided to come here instead. My family was obviously scared because Honduras has a really bad reputation for crime, but I decided to go. And when I first came here, my partner organizations were La Comisión Acción Social Menonitas, and then it program, and now I currently work directly with Cuso. My day changes every day. Now it's a little more stable, but especially over the past 4 years, I was asked to participate in many projects, and I had my hands in everything that was directly related to climate action. and I would travel a lot, which has allowed me to see most of Honduras, which is awesome because it's a gorgeous country. And there were months, I'll be honest, when I was only home for a few days. And when you have two cats, there was a lot of coordinating to do. So yeah, um, the communities that we work with here are wonderful, and our socios, our partners are amazing. And you can see the impact that Cuso has in a lot of the departments of Honduras. And we have always tried to make sustainable projects here because a lot of NGOs go into a community, they'll do a project and then they'll leave. Um, there are one-offs that we do, such as workshops, participating in events. But one thing which is great is that all of our partners love us and ask us to participate in these events, which is really rewarding. Um, yeah,
Maybe I'll jump in and ask a
sure,
follow-up question if that's okay.
of
So you've been
course.
there a little while. You're
Yeah.
having, this tremendous experience. How is it shaping you, or how is it evolving your worldview?
Well, look, I'll be honest, the experience has been amazing. And the culture shock at like when you first come was tough. And of course, there was homesickness. My worldview has really changed considerably because you can clearly see the difference between um, the developing world and the developed world. But you can also see the millions of dollars that people are investing in countries. So, like from Canada, USA, the UN, Japan, Korea, the European Union. Um, and I'll be honest, like I had options after graduating from McGill to work in an office. However, I really wanted to have the experience in the field. They say that like 1 year in an off 1 year in an office is worth like 3 months in the field because it's really hands-on. And I didn't want to sit all day in front of a computer. I mean, there are days that I do sit in front of a computer, like writing documents such as climate change guides for kids, which is awesome. Like one of the greatest rewarding things. I can't even count the amount of schools that I've gone into and have given workshops. Um, Helping out in projects in the field, giving workshops to the Model Forest Initiative, which is actually a Canadian initiative that started in the 90s. And I have also made many new friendships, co-workers. My co-workers are phenomenal, and new networks of friends. So I've really ingrained myself in the Honduran culture here.
Thank you, Christopher. We're going to bring you back for more remarks, but I do
Sure.
want to move on to bring back David. He's got 35 years of international experience. So David, you heard Naomi and Christopher talk about a bit about their skills and transferring. Chris talked about the education and the books and reporting that he's done. So this skills transfer, this skills sharing, this knowledge transfer, and having ripple effects in the community. Can you talk a little bit about your time and how you, back then, what were those ripple effects that you saw in the community?
Ah, well, in Jamaica and Zambia, I was working with other NGOs, in that case, in the area of youth work. Later on, I was working as an organizational development person, helping NGOs and civil society organizations in strengthening their capacity. I think that what was remarkable was, whilst, yes, there were foreign volunteers such as me working in close contact with the local NGOs, we were learning a hell of a lot from the very groups of people and organizations that we were working with. And I learned in Zambia, Zimbabwe as well, and then in South Africa, I learned a lot from the local organizations, how they had developed their capacity and their training programs. It was not an application of Western or Northern models that were going to work, but it would be those methods and ideas from the organizations that were already starting. Now, that's not to say some of my work as an OD volunteer, organizational development, was not assisting at the beginning of organizations, but in doing that, I was able to use applications of organizations that were already African. They were already doing things that pertain to their own cultures. So what I did see over the 20, 30 years, both as a volunteer in organizational development, but also as a field staff officer for Cuso, because we worked with so many NGOs, I was able to see a development and a capacity building within those organizations. And that was thrilling.
I think I'm muted. Thank you for sharing that, David. I do have a follow-up question. As you talk, it's like it was yesterday in some senses. I know we've spoken many times about your service. Maybe for the audience members, you can describe a little bit about how it's changed you personally and professionally.
Well, yes, a bit like my colleagues already speaking. It's become part of our life. The idea of working in different cultures and going far away was a part of it. But in my case, I was in Zambia for a total of 12 years over a long period of time. I was in South Africa after Mandela was released, of course, for another 10 years, and also working in and around Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Namibia. So it changed me. I think the most important thing that I wanted to say to new volunteers, what happened to me was I moved from early thoughts of giving and teaching and offering the people that I was working with to a position of understanding their struggles and becoming involved with them, particularly the liberation movements too, a sense of solidarity. And the movement towards solidarity was also talking about the relationship you had with the organizations that you worked with or the people that you worked with. So we were sympathetic in Cuso and taking action about assisting Zimbabweans in their struggles against Smith, and then helping the ANC in their struggles with the massive South Africans who were working for freedom. So that was an important change in me, was the understanding of moving to a position of solidarity. And Cuso and the volunteers who were living next door to apartheid, to Portuguese fascism and other evils of Mr. Smith, we took a position that we were in favor of liberation of those territories that were still occupied when we were working in the frontline states.
Wow. I do, we can sit and talk and have coffee from hours. I do hope that the audience members take the opportunity to ask you questions. You have an extensive amount of knowledge, and it's not always the case where we have such history in our town halls. So I do hope that you're all getting your questions ready for David and the others. I'd like to bring Naomi back. And this is really, placements or volunteer positions are not always about work. Can you talk a little bit about the social life and some of the challenges and maybe recommendations that you have, Naomi?
Of course. Thank you, Tina. Um, I would say that
Peux-tu parler en français? Sorry.
oui, bien sûr, désolée, j'ai continué un peu dans la langue avec laquelle tu as commencé. Désolée, parce que je me suis rappelée.
Il n'y a pas de quoi.
Alors, effectivement, moi, je dirais que pour une vie enrichissante dans un nouvel environnement, Euh, je propose vraiment le livre Comment se faire des amis de Dale Carnegie parce que je trouve que c'est un livre en fait qui décode certains codes, mais derrière vraiment ce qui est important après, alors là je le dis après 11 mois parce que après 3 mois, ma perspective était complètement différente, mais aujourd'hui après 11 mois, je pense que au niveau de ma vie sociale du moins, je me suis fait plus d'amis, si on peut le dire, ou de très bonnes connaissances avec mes collègues, avec les gens qui sont un peu sur ma rue. Donc finalement, euh, quand je suis arrivée au Cameroun, le représentant national m'avait dit, Naomi, j'espère que tu ne seras pas tout le temps dans les bureaux, va au village, va et profite en fait et fais-toi un vrai réseau, crée-toi un vrai réseau. Et derrière, ça passe aller dans un salon de coiffure, pratiquer un sport, participer aussi à des activités locales, aussi à des foires. Et aussi, moi, un petit truc, c'est que bon, après, ça dépend aussi de d'où on est, mais j'ai tendance à complimenter les gens. Donc, du coup, sur ma rue, ne serait-ce que sur les 5 minutes, je sais que je dis bonjour au monsieur qui coupe la viande dans la rue, je dis bonjour à celui qui a une brocante, etc. Parce que je me dis quelque part que si on me kidnappe, au moins il y aura quelqu'un qui pourra dire non, arrêtez, je la connais. Donc, quelque part, ça part vraiment de mon quotidien, des gens qui m'entourent. Et puis, bon, au niveau de mes défis, si on peut le dire comme ça, ou des recommandations que je pourrais avoir, bah, les défis, j'ai envie de dire, ils sont tous les mêmes, hein, à partir du moment où on change d'environnement. Alors, je dis ça tout le temps comme analogie. Quand on apprenait l'alphabet, aujourd'hui, on ne se souvient pas que c'était difficile pour nous d'apprendre l'alphabet. Donc, c'est un changement dans notre vie. Quelque part, en venant au Cameroun, alors je suis camerounaise parce que mes deux parents sont camerounais, mais je n'ai jamais vécu au Cameroun. Et pourtant, bah voilà, je fais partie des gens qui me ressemblent, mais finalement, des fois, on se comprend pas au niveau de l'interculturalisme, etc. Mais ça se dépasse lorsqu'on crée justement un réseau et que ces personnes-là sont prêtes à nous appuyer, nous encourager et surtout nous soutenir lors de ces moments un peu difficiles, si on peut le dire comme ça. Après, ça dépend aussi des personnalités. Et je pense aussi qu'il ne faut jamais oublier le fait qu'il y a notre bureau, donc les bureaux pays en fait de Cuso, qui sont une source inestimable d'encouragement, de support, de conseils aussi, parce qu'avec la courbe justement d'adaptation, on est capable de trouver en fait la phase dans laquelle on est. Donc au début, on est super excité, on descend, on remonte, etc. Et après, à la fin, moi, j'en suis rendue à 11 mois, j'ai pas vu le temps passer et j'ai envie de continuer. Et ce, malgré les défis, si on peut le dire comme ça. Ils ne comptent plus parce que j'ai j'ai été résiliente, si on peut le dire comme ça. Donc, c'est un peu ça, je dirais, au niveau, c'est de maintenir vraiment aussi un équilibre personnel et professionnel. Euh, le plus clair de mon personnel influe mon professionnel parce que ça reste des relations humaines que nous créons et Cuso, je le dirais aussi, est un incubateur de solutions pour les problèmes réels que nous avons, les problèmes concrets que nous avons en société et de participer justement à mettre sa pierre à l'édifice. Merci, Tina.
No, merci à vous. Thank you, Naomi, showing the arc of, the different ebbs and flows of international volunteering, which is natural. I see some hands up. I would ask you all to just put your questions in the Q&A. It's a little challenging to open up all the buttons, but we will get to as many as we can. We've got 11 questions in there right now, and we are going to go to those questions. So give us just like a couple of seconds as the panelists read through them. we will get right to it. So go. Okay. Oh, William's on the. Hi to all of the alumni, first of all. I'm recognizing some names. So there's a first question around, can you volunteer? So all of those, I guess, specific recruitment questions, we're going to keep this and we're happy to answer them at some point. I'm just going to ask if there's questions for David or Christopher or Naomi based on the experiences that they've shared right now. This is about being a volunteer. Okay, so maybe both of you, I don't know how it's changed over the years, David, but there's a question. It's an anonymous question asking around the financial responsibility. Oh, yeah, financial responsibilities to the family of the future. How are both of you, or David at the time, I know you were 20, I think you said you were 26. How would you recommend that they balance their obligations around finance? How are you guys doing that?
When we were volunteers,
Yes,
I presume.
correct. Did you have any challenges with your financials at the time? I think that's
Well,
one of the questions.
I think in Zambia, when I was working with the Zambia Youth Service, I wasn't making very much money. It was sort of £2 a week or something like that. I can't remember, but we were provided with food and shelter and whatever. I know Cuso had a returned allowance that was paid when a cooperant or a volunteer came back. But I don't know that we were very much in a situation where we were able to support back in Canada whilst we were in service our families financially. That might have come much later when we were back within the Canadian economy.
Naomi and Christopher, do you want to talk about your stipends, or like, are you comfortable? Like, how is your situation? Not to go down the rabbit hole, but just talking about finances in
Sure.
general. Are you out of pocket, I
Yeah.
guess?
No, well, what happens here is we are provided with a stipend and we are provided an apartment. So the apartment is paid for and we're provided with a stipend. In Honduras specifically, because of the security issues, we are also provided with transportation. We are not allowed to take taxis. We are not allowed to take buses. So we're provided with transportation. So like if we need to go to the pharmacy and stuff like that, it's Cuso who pays for it. So I know that in some other countries with Cuso, I think Honduras is actually the only country where transportation is provided for free. So, and we really appreciate that. So yeah. And also Honduras is really cheap. So like I just went to go buy a watermelon and it was $1. So like and like I know like in like Costco or like wherever in Montreal, which by the way, we actually do have a Costco and a Walmart here, which I was completely surprised. Um yeah, so like fruit's really cheap, the meat's really cheap. For most Hondurans, it's not that cheap. But with our stipend, it's fine. So
Thanks for sharing that. Naomi, how is it in Cameroon?
Alors, je vais continuer dans la même lancée que Christopher. Alors, du côté de Cuso, au Cameroun, alors effectivement, l'appartement nous est offert. Enfin, quand j'ai offert, on nous le procure. Au niveau de la téléphonie aussi, donc on a un certain budget chaque mois pour le téléphone, que moi, par exemple, tout particulièrement, j'utilise aussi pour Internet, parce que j'en ai besoin autant au travail qu'ici à la maison. Le transport aussi est inclus, donc on a un petit budget qui nous est alloué pour pouvoir nous déplacer. Bon, après, si on veut s'en tenir qu'au budget de Cuso pour se déplacer, ça limite aussi ses moyens et avenues de faire des connexions avec des gens. Donc, chacun, en fait, gère, j'ai envie de dire, son budget comme il peut, mais je pense que c'est plus qu'assez pour se déplacer et aller au travail. Sinon, au-delà de ça, je pense que, comme Christopher l'a dit, bon, au Cameroun, après, oui, qu'on parle des privilèges, de son privilège lorsqu'on vient dans un pays en développement, on ne le voit pas de la même manière, mais le fait est que je trouve quand même que la vie, elle n'est pas nécessairement plus chère qu'au Canada, mais elle est sensiblement chère parce que ça dépend. Enfin, tu changes un peu ta manière de vivre et puis tu te gâtes quand tu peux. Et puis, quelque part, moi, je me suis lancé le défi avec le, le fonds de subsistance que Cuso me donne d'essayer de faire aussi des économies. Donc, je me suis lancé ce challenge-là pour voir un peu comment je peux vivre et comment je peux changer certaines habitudes. Et puis, je pense que finalement, c'est plus qu'assez pour vivre décemment. Comme c'est d'ailleurs stipulé lorsque Cuso parle d'un fonds de subsistance pour tenir, en fait, l'essentiel.
Merci. Merci, Naomi. Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, David. I think it's important to, you know, highlight that very real concern of people around their finances in today's economy. There's more we can discuss around that, and I invite you to connect with Cuso International. There is some request for you to highlight your volunteer experience in Kenya, David. I don't know that did you talk about Kenya?
No, I was not a volunteer
Yeah,
in Kenya,
I
no.
didn't think so. Okay,
But
so
it
we're
was
gonna,
part of the East Central Southern Africa region. And I was visiting a lot as a staff person,
okay.
Kenya, in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, there's a lot of, which is natural. Everybody, it's International Volunteer Day, so it's natural that people are talking about the volunteer journey, which is very specific. And I don't
Yes.
have my recruitment manager on the call today, which in hindsight I probably should have. Uh, sorry, I'm reading it. I ended up at VSO. So what else? Okay, perfect. Here's a great one. Thank you, Mark. David, I just wanted to say hi. I was your next door neighbor on First Avenue in Ottawa in 1977. Sorry, we're going back and back down the um, trail. I ended up being VSO's medical advisor for many years and overlapped with Cuso. And so
Gosh,
the question is, David, I know you're excited. What health challenges did you face as a volunteer?
well, obviously the first question I have is, who are you?
Mark Wise, Mark Wise.
But I can carry on with the question. What was it about health?
Yes. Did you face any health challenges? And if you did, what were they?
Oh gosh. What I had an expression about joint Cuso and no bugs for 2 years, but I'm afraid there was. I had a gamut of the usual malaria and a few times and hepatitis, but that was part for the course. Lots of people had those things, and I wasn't in any accidents or anything like that. I married a Zambian nurse, which was probably quite strategic, and Irene was a great medical person, and still is. So I think people should do everything to keep well, because if you do get something serious, it can be difficult to enter the local medical system because it may not be as updated as Canada's, that's for sure. And of course, Cuso itself has its own health department. If anybody is very sick, they would be brought back home. I didn't have any huge crises, so I haven't got a lot to comment about. But there were some people that had to go home because of illness, and and that Cuso was there to help you.
Thank you, David. I see Naomi's hand and Christopher put his physical hand up, so please go ahead.
Alors, je voulais tout simplement mentionner, parce qu'on parlait ici des fonds de subsistance, en tant que volontaire de la diaspora, honnêtement, ce que je vis au Cameroun, aucun argent n'aurait pu me l'acheter en fait. Donc on parlait quelque part de voilà un fonds de subsistance, on a vraiment l'essentiel, mais c'est vraiment un encouragement à s'engager, j'ai envie de dire. Mais derrière c'est une expérience qui n'a pas de prix finalement. On parlait certes d'argent, mais ça n'a aussi pas de prix.
Merci. Yes, much more than a financial experience. It's deeper than that, the finances. Christopher, you had your hand up. You want to talk maybe about health or I'm not sure where you're
Yeah,
at.
sure. So Cuso has, from what I know, phenomenal insurance. We're with Sutton, and pretty much 100% you go to the hospital and everything is covered. And one good thing about Honduras is that the hospitals here, we don't go to the public ones, we go to the private ones. So it's kind of a privilege, but I'm quite familiar with the hospitals here in Honduras. I've I've been to many of them around Honduras, and the one here is phenomenal. It's state of the art. The doctors are incredible. I get better health service here than I would in home. And it's like I've had 100%. I am completely happy, completely satisfied with the health services here and with Sutton as an insurance company. So
Thank you, Christopher. You really ramped up towards the end. Now there's 38 questions. We won't get to them all. There's 10 minutes left in the presentation and discussion, and I really want to give some final remarks to some of our speakers or all of our speakers. And I'll start with you, David. Advice. So hindsight's 2020, been in this 35 years. Looking back, what advice would you consider giving someone who wanted to do international volunteering today?
Okay. I think the advice I do have is, yes, you're a teacher or you're an activist, you're doing some work in the community. But I think for a volunteer, you should go to everything. Go to the celebrations, go to the funerals, go to the weddings, go to the graduations. Pick up and do the things with your dear friends that you've made, and go to their villages. That gets you out of the routine of being what you are professionally. Now you'll end up as a doctor, maybe, or less, because of your profession going certain places. But I think it's important, sitting with your colleague from Zimbabwe or Namibia, and going to their home and meeting their parents and understanding the culture. Also go to the pubs. That's where the chitty chat takes place. In Zambia, in the Copper Belt cities in the north, I would end up at the township bars or the township taverns with my friends. And there, you learn so much about what the hell's going on, what people think. So my advice always is don't go roaring off to the beach somewhere on every holiday, or don't go and be with the old Cusos and all that stuff, but go and learn from the culture and the people that you're living with.
Thank you, David. Sorry to truncate time. Christopher, in 2 minutes or less, what vivid moment is standing out for you? You've been there 7 years. I'm sure there's many, many vivid moments, but if you can kind of just give us a couple of highlights.
sure. Yeah, there are many, many, many moments. I think vividly there are two, working with children in schools for climate change. I think that was one of the most rewarding experiences. The other one was when I arrived, I wrote an investigation on climate justice and climate change for a community that was suffering from coastal erosion severely. And because of that investigation, the process started to relocate them. So in 2020, they actually moved to a new location and they are no longer in the location that they were, which for me, and also because of that investigation, I was asked to go to an international conference with my ex-boss, Karen, and which was awesome because it was in Montreal. And so we were there for a week. It was the conference was called Adaptation Futures, and there were like 1,500 participants from all around the world. And it was pretty cool. And it was really nice for my presentation to be recognized like that.
Good.
So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Hopefully, before you sign out, we'll have another vivid moment that you can share with the audience. And Naomi, I leave you with the final word. You're really great at making recommendations on how candidates should approach their international volunteering experience. I know you shared some of it with some book titles earlier, but can you dive a little bit deeper into what approach you would recommend for all the questions were about like, how do I volunteer? How do I do this? What do I do that? So I think your final comments will support a lot of the questions that were asked.
Alors, merci Tina encore une fois de me donner la parole. Et puis, je dirais que quelque part, David et Christopher ont vraiment fait le tour de la question, en fait. Donc, vraiment de s'intégrer, de faire partie du tissu national dans lequel on vit nouvellement. Et puis, c'est vraiment de pouvoir aborder l'expérience, en fait, qu'on vit avec curiosité, enchantement et de créer vraiment un réseau solide, tout simplement. Alors moi, depuis que je suis arrivée au Cameroun, il y a quelques livres que j'ai eu à lire. Justement, j'avais proposé Comment se faire des amis de Dale Carnegie parce que je trouve que ça couvre quand même pas mal de thèmes. Mais effectivement, il y a des livres camerounais. Je pense aussi, même aussi de s'inviter à lire des auteurs des pays dans lesquels nous sommes parce qu'au Cameroun, justement, il y a pas mal de livres qui parlent justement de cet exode rural, des gens qui partent du village pour aller dans la ville et qui vivent et traversent en fait à peu près les mêmes sentiments que nous en tant que volontaires lorsqu'on quitte le Canada, pouvons faire l'expérience, dont on pourrait faire l'expérience. Donc, c'est ça, c'est vraiment tout ce que tout le monde a dit et puis c'était juste un peu ma touche à la fin.
Merci Naomi.
Merci à toi.
Et voilà. Okay. Sorry, I'm switching languages. Thank you all. David, maybe before I just kind of summarize, you had some books that you were sharing with me earlier. Now that your camera's working, did you want to hold them up if you've got them close to you? Okay.
But now I can't find me.
Oh, you're on the side column. I can see you. It's okay if you show.
Okay. Yeah, there we are. I've got 3 books about Cuso that were written mostly by Cuso people. This one is Man Deserves Man, which is 1966 stories of Cuso folks written by our first executive director, Bill McQuinney. And it's most illuminating for people who want to go overseas. It's called Man Deserves Man. Another book is Land of Lost Content by Ian Smiley, who was an executive director of Cuso. And it was, it's a history of Cuso. He declares it's his history, but very informative of early days of Cuso. And the last one is all about Cuso in development for its first 25 years, written by Ruth Brewer. It's also an excellent story about Cuso, wonderfully researched. It's called Canada's Global Villagers, appropriately. So I recommend those 3 books.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And a little segue off of what we're going to discuss, but I think it's important that everybody have the rich content and the historical. We are a 63-year-old organization that has evolved, as you can see in the panelists today. And so with that, we have come to the end of our hour. Thank you to David, Christopher, and Naomi. I hope you had fun. I hope we can do this again at some point. And thank you all online for joining us and rallying and celebrating the lifelong impact of international volunteers in all its many forms. So there's Canadian volunteers, which are represented here today. We have national volunteers, we have South-South volunteers, we have diaspora volunteers, which was also represented here today. It's a huge, huge community. And I would like to express gratitude to Global Affairs Canada through the Government of Canada, through Global Affairs Canada, our Cuso donors and our Cuso supporters for their financial contributions in making this wonderful work happen. As we end the season, or begin the giving season, I should say, many of you know in Canada, we're facing a postal strike, which is delaying, the traditional methods of how we have secured donations in the past. And so with that, I would ask you to support Cuso International. You can do so online through a secure online portal at www.cusointernational.org. Your contributions go to support projects that Naomi, Christopher, and past David would have worked on. And they span from the continent, throughout countries within the continent of Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. And we thank you for any generous support that you can give at during this giving season. And with that, I want to once again thank our interpreters who are online. Thank you for taking an hour. I know it's a lot to ask, but I was so overjoyed when I saw the number of people who had registered and who are going to get this recording afterwards. It'll be up on our YouTube channel. So thank you for joining us, taking some time. Wish you happy and safe holidays. Happy International Volunteer Day to all three of you and everyone who's online, who's a past volunteer or thinking about volunteering. And as David said, in solidarity, bye for now.
Cheerio. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, everyone watching.
Thank you, friends.